The tragic story of Mercedes-Benz that no one knows. The first person in history to introduce the concept of a car. The Mercedes-Benz brand is not only one of the most recognizable and important car manufacturers, but it is also inextricably linked to the concept of a car. This is supported even by the brand's historical significance. After all, nearly 156 years ago, German engineer Karl Benz officially filed a patent for his gas-powered vehicle, becoming the first person in history to introduce the concept of a car. On January 2, 1866, an event occurred that marked the beginning of the history of the entire world automotive industry. Mercedes-Benz, like everything else, began small. Today, we'll explain how the automotive industry legend was born and how Mercedes has managed to remain one of the top car manufacturers for so long. As I previously stated, Mercedes-Benz was founded in 1886, but the road to the creation of this car began much earlier, in 1871, when Karl and his partner opened a mechanical workshop in Man. Karl dreamed of making his business successful. Karl Friedrich Benz was born on November 25, 1844, in Baden-Württemberg, Germany, which is now part of the city of Karlsruhe. Karl's interest in various mechanisms is most likely due to his father, who worked as a train driver and died of a cold. Karl was interested in photography and repairing wall clocks, so he was already familiar with screwdrivers. And on July 9, 1864, at the age of 19, he graduated from the Mechanical Engineering Department of the Karlsruhe Polytechnical School. After that, he went to work at an engineering plant, and despite enjoying his job, he left after 2 years as a mechanic. He liked making and designing new things, but his job at the factory didn't require much creativity. Karl, who had learned the value of money since childhood, never shied away from dirty or difficult work for several years. The young man worked at small factories and Karlsruhe in Mannheim and Vienna, while also moonlighting in repair shops and agricultural equipment factories. Although the engineer worked diligently as a hired worker, he began to have thoughts of doing something on his own. Thus, in 1871, he established his first company, a mechanical workshop that also supplied building materials. Like any other businessman, Karl hoped to make his business successful, but despite his best efforts, things did not work out. There were few orders and even fewer funds, and the young workshop owners were soon in over their heads. The development of the first engine took over 6 years. Ritter immediately announced his retirement from the company, effectively ending it. Karl tried to persuade him not to abandon their business, but his partner refused to listen. Karl was thus left alone. He couldn't even afford to rent a room. He was devastated, but he was still certain of what he was doing. After all, the idea of developing an internal combustion engine to save his small business had already formed in his mind. Ben was even forced to seek assistance from the father of the girl he was courting at the time, his future father-in-law, Karl Friedrich Ringer, a carpenter by trade and a simple man with a firm footing. Karl Benz married Cecil Bertha Ringer on July 20, 1870, but the bride's dowry was the only one Karl received from his father-in-law. Moving ahead, I'll just say that Karl and Bertha, Benz's marriage is the best example of a happy union of two hearts that lasted a lifetime. Karl Benz began developing internal combustion engines after acquiring his own mechanical workshop. Benz's plan is to sell agricultural and industrial motors. But, in addition to the engine, Karl was working on another project, the development of a horseless carriage. It took 6 years to develop the first engine. On December 31, 1878, Benz received a patent for his two-stroke gasoline engine. And that was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, he patented several items that we are all familiar with. A battery-powered ignition system, a spark plug, an accelerator carburetor, a radiator for the engine's water cooling system, and, later, a clutch and a gearbox are all standard. Benz only sold one car in Germany. In 1882, the company had already reached a monthly production and sales rate of 200 engines. Karl Benz, on the other hand, worked every day alongside his employees. Nobody knows, by the way, if there would have been a car at all. It only took him 6 months to begin production and sales of the model. Carl and his wife used the horseless carriage for personal purposes at first, but Ben's car went to the World Exhibition in Paris in 1887. However, it's difficult to say that it piqued people's interest. Benz also only sold one car in Germany between 1886 and 1888. The collapse of the exchange rate, as well as the entry of more successful manufacturers into the automobile market, such as Ford Motor Company, influenced its growth significantly. All of these factors combined to cause Benz to enter a prolonged period of stagnation. On July 28, 1920, however, the situation was solved in a straightforward manner. All vehicles were manufactured solely under the Mercedes-Benz brand. In 1928, he handed over the executive position to Hans Nebel, who had a significant influence on the majority of the lineup at the time. Only 2 years later, the Mannheim 370 and Berg 500 passenger cars were produced. Mercedes-Benz has taken its stable position. During World War II, Daimler-Benz continued to produce automobiles until it was subjected to a 2-week aerial bombardment. Unfortunately, the factory was reduced to ruins after that. Daimler-Benz were declared physically extinct by the board of directors in 1945. This did not imply that the company had ceased to exist. In January 1952, the number W191 was assigned to an improved model with a larger body. The W187 car was also released, filling the middle segment. It was thanks to these two vehicles that the company was able to lay a solid foundation for future growth, even becoming Western Europe's leading automotive manufacturer. Mercedes-Benz has established itself as one of the leaders of the German automobile industry, securing a stable position in the state. The majority of the models were exported to other countries, where they only demonstrated the highest technical level. The fashion for Finns gradually faded, and a new one emerged, focusing on more luxurious models. The letters also indicate the type. E stood for fuel injection rather than a carburetor, and D stood for a diesel engine. Mercedes-Benz unveiled the new E-Class W210 in 1995, a car that stood out from the crowd with its economical design. Another historic event for Mercedes occurred in 1999. Mercedes ended the decade with the introduction of two new S and C class vehicles, the W220 and C215. The new C class, W20, was the most recent innovation of the 1990s. It's worth noting that Mercedes-Benz doubled its model range in 10 years, but at the same time, the brand's quality suffered. Various tools inside the car frequently failed, tarnishing the brand's reputation. Mercedes-Benz vehicles are popular among discerning buyers, so many companies specialize in fine-tuning these vehicles. The following are the most well-known of them. AMG is the company's official tuning division. The Georgian president was shot at while driving a S600 Mercedes in 1998. Despite the fact that several automatic rounds were fired at the Mercedes, and it was even hit by a grenade, the head of state remained safe and sound, and the most famous entrepreneur, Steve Jobs, only purchased 6 Mercedes and drove them without license plates. This is legal in California, but only for the first 6 months after the date of purchase. So, Jobs would buy a car, drive it for 6 months, and then return it to the salon to get a new one. Will be always remembered. Carl Benz himself retired in his final days, enjoying his impeccable reputation as the founding father of the global automotive industry. On April 4, 1929, the genius man died of pneumonia. Bertha Benz died on May 5, 1944, in Ladenburg, at the age of 85, outliving her husband by a long time. When Carl Benz died in 1929, there were 30 million of his cars on the road. Today, there are over 500 million. Mercedes did not become a mass-market car, only 1 million new cars with a triangular star were introduced each year, but the company was never interested in winning over the masses. The Mercedes brand's elite status was especially evident at the end of the 20th century, when Daimler-Benz merged with the American company Chrysler in order to strengthen its position in the United States. However, during the merger, Benz name was dropped from the brand's name, which is unfortunate because the mythical name Mercedes remained. And the name of the company's founder and inventor, Carl Benz, vanished. On the other hand, the name Carl Benz has not and will never disappear from human history. People will always be curious about who invented the first automobile and how he did it, and the answer will always be. Overall, Carl Benz lived the happy life of an engineer-inventor who saw the fruits of his labor, was recognized during his lifetime, and was not forgotten after his death. Carl Benz revolutionized the way we commute every day. From riding in carriages to now cutting our travel time whether by bus, train, or car. In today's world, having a car has become more of a necessity because it is something that we choose to have in our daily lives, and it is a choice that is high on the priority list to own. The type of car you drive places you in a different class among wealthy people. Whereas some people can choose any car they want, others have a set budget for what they are looking for.